Where can you find 6,000 local businesses with just one click? EverythingMidmo.com.
Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes webcast. Today we'll talk about Missouri's 31-21 victory over Nevada and look ahead just a little bit to the Big 12 season. Dave, your impressions of that game against Nevada, that makes them now 4-0 in the non-conference schedule, which is probably better than a lot of us would have thought.
Right.
And I guess in the last 4 years they've yet to lose a non-conference game. How do you kind of assess this year, though, this 4-0 season?
Well, I think if you look at the lineup of teams they played, it's probably the least impressive. Wouldn't have said that 4 weeks ago, but after looking at those teams and how they played against Missouri, and then more important, outside of the game against Missouri, not too impressive, any of those four, really. And I don't even really include Furman in the mix, the three FBS teams that they played. But to go 4-0, nonetheless, I think maybe more important for this team because it is so young, it's inexperienced, and there are a lot of toss-up games in the Big 12 schedule with this group. So to have 4 wins already going into Big 12 season, where I don't know if anyone would be surprised if this young team would necessarily go 4-4 against some Big 12 teams if they get hot, some other teams. Then you're still sitting at 8-4, and I think that's a pretty successful year for this team. So I think it's really important to go 4-0 against the 4 teams that they just played.
The FBS teams they've played have a combined record of 2-8. So
Yeah.
I mean that's just the facts. That's what it is. They haven't beaten great teams. But for me, I think maybe the thing that I see as a positive is Missouri is doing a lot of the things they've done in previous years, even though they have a really young team. They commit about 2/3 as many penalties as their opponents, about half as many turnovers. They're doing the things like the good Pinkel teams do, which is they make other teams beat them instead of beating themselves. So I think that's a big positive. The biggest negative would be at this point that they're not running the ball very well, something we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But just generally, I mean, there's other positives too. Obviously, the play of Gabbert's been better than anyone could have expected, and obviously the kicking game with Russell and Jake Harry has been very positive too. So I don't know. I guess going in this year, people were thinking in a worst case scenario they might be 2-2, or would have been happy with 3-1. So 4-0. It's been at this point. I guess I would give them a good solid A- probably on what they've done so far.
Yeah, and I think they're a borderline top 25 team, which is a pretty good thing when you're going up into the Big 12 schedule. Then
early in the game against Nevada, Missouri goes ahead, or they're losing 7-6. They score a touchdown and they go for 2, miss it, so they go up 12-7. What's your thoughts on early in the game going for 2?
Well, I don't quite hyperventilate over those decisions as some people do. I know the announcer for ESPN were just beside themselves when Missouri went for 2. But the thing is, Nevada started going for 2 also then, so the coaches kind of balance each other out. I'm not crazy about those decisions early in the game, in the first half especially if you have a decent defense where you think that you can. You're not going to be chasing points the whole rest of the game. I've looked at some of the studies that have been done in the NFL. The numbers are a little easier to track down. I think teams are generally have a 45 to 55% success rate on 2-point conversions. So if it's a 50-50 shot of getting one more point than what you would expect to be a 100% chance on a point after, maybe it's an okay call to make sometimes. If you're behind by a certain number of points there on the card. But I'm just not crazy about it because, it's something you can always look back on if it's a 1 or 2 point game later on in the game and something you can look back on and regret. And the thing that I think when it comes to Missouri is they're not a great team down there on the goal line or on the 5-yard line where those are set up. They don't seem to have a lot of great plays running the ball, and they don't have they've got Denario Alexander, but not a really big option you can throw to, and it doesn't seem like they're very creative down there sometimes. So I'm not crazy not wild about those decisions.
You only had to get 3 yards, but it's so congested at that point in the field and stuff. I actually had some free time today and looked at, during Pinkel's tenure here, 40% conversion rate on 2-point conversions, 97% on regular extra points. So if you just look at it that way, if you're beginning a game and you want to score the most points possible, you always kick it. And then obviously as the game wears on, there might be situations with time and score where it makes it worthwhile. But I don't really think there's even much independent thought going on here. I think they are kind of slaves to the chart, so to speak. You go back to 2007 against Illinois, they go up 13-7 and go for it because someone misread the chart and nobody spoke up and said, wait a minute here, this doesn't sound like good. So I think they're strictly looking at the chart and doing what it tells them to do. And again, it's not a terrible statistical difference, but 40% versus 97% in the long haul, you score more points if you kick it.
Right.
The other thing that kind of jumped out at us at that game against Nevada was the struggles Missouri had running the ball. If you compare the numbers this year to last year they averaged 5.2 yards a carry. That includes against Big 12 competition. This year they're at 3.8, I believe, against some pretty soft competition. Yeah. What do you see as the problem there, and is it correctable?
Well, I think if you look at the other night against Nevada, I think the offensive line just looks kind of clumsy. That's the best word I can come up with. They're just not exploding off the ball. It doesn't seem to be that they're making the right blocks at the point of attack. Missouri does a lot of plays where they pull the guard and the tackle. I think it's like a counter play on the other side of the center, and when they do that, it's either hit big time, like it was on Washington's big 42-yard run that he had, even though there were two guys on block that he had to get past there, or it's a 5 or 6 yard loss, it seems like. It just, something is not very crisp there, and I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if it's just the guards, the inside runs are just not working very well. A lot of people like to blame the style of plays that Missouri runs back there, but we've seen them have success with the same exact running plays in the past, whether it be Derek Washington last year or Tony Temple 2 years ago. So I don't know if it's so much the structure of the plays as just the execution of the offensive line. And, Gary Pinkel said something pretty interesting on Monday, admitting that they're going up against some defensive fronts that were in the past, they would have thrown the ball automatically and switched to a pass. Now with a young quarterback back there, they're still going with a run call, even though the defense favors a pass in that situation, and maybe that will evolve as the season goes on if Blaine Gabbert earns some more trust. I would say so far that the 9th most efficient quarterback in the country should probably get a little a benefit of the doubt there, so maybe we'll see that change up a little bit, and they won't be just getting stonewalled at the line on so many running plays.
Of course, you can change a play, but if you don't know what a better play to change it to is, you're just changing for the sake of change. I'm kind of in the camp that would like to see them go to more quick-hitting running plays. You see a lot of spread teams that can run between the tackles and kind of get their shoulders squared to the line and get something going instead of always every play he's going so sideways. And he's not really, Washington at least is not really a running back that's to me, that doesn't suit his style. I think he's a 220-pound guy, kind of a bruiser. And you'd also, with your running plays, you would like to, worst case scenario, get 2 yards. And Missouri's worst case scenario is you're losing 5 yards, and now you're just sort of, that whole Nevada game, it seemed like they were just sort of killing time between pass plays with these running plays, and it's been kind of a trend in all 4 of these games that their running game is nothing special till late in the game where they might break one off. The Bowling Green game was maybe the one exception where they did have an effective running game, but that I think is a concern in Big 12 play because when Missouri is one-dimensional, at least historically, they haven't done very well. Even if they've had a good passing numbers, they don't end up winning the game. So that's as we look maybe next week as we look ahead at the Nebraska game, we'll maybe look at that a little closer. Let's talk a little bit about the Big 12 North race. Going into the season, I think we both thought Kansas was probably the favorite with maybe Missouri and Nebraska right behind. We've been through the non-conference schedule. What do you think now?
Well, I think I'm still going that way, but I'm not maybe as sold as that lineup as I was before. Part of it is these 3 teams, let's admit, besides Nebraska going to Virginia Tech, and maybe Kansas playing Southern Miss last week, haven't really played much competition yet. Kansas has taken care of the Sun Belt and their other 3 games all at home, played good defense for 3.5 quarters at Virginia Tech and led that game late. Couldn't punch in a touchdown, but kicked field goals and was in position to win a low-scoring game. And then Kansas has played, 3 nobodies and a good Southern Miss team. So that was only a 7-point win, but you got to give them credit, I guess, for just winning the game. And Missouri, they've done what they've had to do against bad teams so far. So it's hard to really come up with any kind of consensus after watching those 3. I think things you can look at as other developments on the teams schedules as far as their Big 12 competition. Texas Tech looks pretty beatable right now. They've lost 2 in a row. Things are kind of reeling down there in Lubbock. Nebraska and Kansas both play Texas Tech, so I think they could maybe win those games. The Baylor situation is huge now. Robert Griffin, maybe the most indispensable quarterback in the league, is out for the season. Nebraska has to go down to Waco. Baylor comes up here. So those games to me look much more winnable than I would have thought, a week ago. So
for Nebraska particularly, I thought before the season started, I thought that's a game they probably going to lose, and now I don't think that's the case.
Right. So, but I still think for Missouri, their first Big 12 game against Nebraska and their last one against Kansas is really going to decide everything. And I don't think this race is going to be over quick. I think it's going to go down to the wire again.
I think the big disadvantage Nebraska has, they play both MU and KU on the road, and so if it gets to a situation where you got 3 teams at 5-3 and the home teams take care of business, then Nebraska would lose out on the tiebreaker in that situation. So
right.
It's almost, if things go the way we think it could go, it could all come down to that game at Arrowhead between Kansas and Missouri. Lastly, we'll do viewer mail.
Okay, we've got a question this week from Eric here in Columbia. And he wants to talk a little bit about the Tigers' red zone offense. The Tigers did not turn the ball over in the red zone, which is always a plus, but call me a little nitpicky. I was a little discouraged that Mizzou could not punch it in during the Nevada game. If I'm correct, the Tigers had 5 trips to the red zone and just 1 touchdown. The other 4 trips ended in a field goal. Has Coach Pinkel discussed this in any of his press conferences? I guess I just feel like when the Tigers' offense gets to the red zone in conference play, then they will have to score more touchdowns. I completely agree. Missouri has been to the red zone 15 times this year, have come away with set 14 scores. That's good, but only 7 of those are touchdowns. The other 7 are field goals. On the bright side, Grant Russell's doing a great job kicking field goals, but they're just not scoring enough touchdowns when they get down there. Only 47%, which is dead last in the Big 12, and it's last by a wide margin. That's 95th nationally as far as touchdown percentage in the red zone. That's got to get better because you figure against Big 12 defenses, you're going to get fewer opportunities down there in the red zone. So you've got to make the most out of those chances. There are only a handful of teams in the country that have been in the red zone more times and have had a worse percentage. So that's got to get better. I think maybe some of the factors involved there are kind of the stuff we talked about with the 2-point conversion tries.
If you can't run the ball,
right.
The closer you get, the more congested.
Right, and I think missing a Martin Rucker and a Chase Kaufman, a really good red zone target, hurts his team a little bit too. Denari Alexander's been outstanding. He's a big guy that can go up and jump and get those fade passes, but those don't seem to have a very high percentage of working, especially so far this year. So that's something that they really have to improve on. Maybe expand the playbook a little bit down there and come up with something a little more creative.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. Tune in again next week when we will discuss the big Nebraska at Missouri Thursday night game in more detail.